Do you think we should move on? Are you bored of all of this? Do you think people don't care?
Well, I think there's a fundamental principle at stake here about trust in the person who occupies the highest office in the land. And for those of us with children who try to teach them about right and wrong and taking responsibility and being accountable for their actions, this is a pretty poor lesson from the Prime Minister, and he really has to take proper responsibility. But the way that I would like to move on, and I'd like to see Scotland move on, is by asking this question. Is this really the best group of people to govern Scotland? Is this really the best form of government for Scotland? Is it not time now for Scotland to respond to this in a democratic way, have an opportunity to take control of our country, to assert ourselves as an independent nation, and to govern ourselves away from all of the absolute mess that the Johnson government have created in Westminster?
I mean, I'm very impressed you managed to change an answer about whether people are angry about Partygate into a campaign for a second Scottish independence referendum. If we can, let's just stay on. No, it's fair enough. It's fair enough. It's what politicians do. Let's just stick with the matter at hand for a second, in the sense that people would say this isn't a resigning matter, in the sense that it is kind of akin to a speeding fine. If you got a speeding fine, you wouldn't resign as an MP. No one would do that in their daily jobs. Millions of people get fined every year. We are getting slightly carried away.
Well, we're not really, because speeding fines, lots of MPs have found themselves under enormous pressure when they've had a speeding fine. It doesn't require them to resign as an MP. Of course not. Everybody has to understand that MPs are real people and they make mistakes. But we're talking about the Prime Minister. And we're talking about someone who repeatedly assured Parliament that there was nothing to see here and that everything was above board. And none of that has proven to be true. So it's not just about the party. It's not just about the breaking of the rules. It's the repeated misleading of Parliament. And the Sue Gray report is going to land tomorrow. And we will again see the depth of concern about the Prime Minister's behaviour and how he has continuously led Parliament down the wrong conclusion that he was surprised that parties had existed when he was at the lion's share of them. It really is a fundamental principle about integrity, honesty and responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, just to point out, I mean, I think the potential might have been up to 18 parties across Downing Street and Whitehall. I think he's certainly been, or alleged to have been, at a number of them. I'm not entirely sure it's the majority of them. But you're right in suggesting this could carry on. But ultimately, frankly, this is going to be up to Conservative MPs to decide, not for you or I or anyone else, really, whether he remains in post until at least the next general election. And in those circumstances, they say, well, now's not the time because of those big challenges that we know are facing the country, whether you live in Cardenbeath or whether you live in Cornwall, about the cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine. Now is not a good time to be changing the leader of the country.
Well, I fundamentally disagree with that. Does that position rest upon the argument that because of all of these international challenges and local challenges, we should just stumble on with someone who has proven to be serially dishonest and someone who does not take responsibility for their actions? And that applies to both Rishi Sunak and to the Prime Minister himself. It's simply inconceivable that they are the best of a bad bunch. I mean, is that really what we're saying? And the points have been made repeatedly about the French election for a new president and other democratic processes taking place in the midst of international events. International events do not stop and should not stop democracy. This war is something that, of course, we are determined to see a resolution to as swiftly as possible. But really, is Boris Johnson himself key to that? The House are reasonably well united. There are some nuances in the House about how we should approach the Ukrainian situation, but there hasn't been any great division there. And so surely replacing Boris Johnson is not beyond the Conservative Party to get right, because the longer he stays in office, the more complicit his backbenchers are for his transgressions, and the more damage it will do to them as a party as we head towards the general elections.